If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists and the bootlicks hate that. And now, the Sunday address. You know, there's some really slow Negroes out there. They think that because they put on a badge, that means that they've escaped blackness. Marilyn Mosby, the former prosecutor for Baltimore, was one of these deluded individuals. See, just like police officers, district attorneys also have badges. Did you know that? It's true. And for a lot of Negroes, they think that badge represents the dominant society giving them a pass, telling them they made it out of being black. Now, of course, they don't have the authority to go after white power, and most of them don't. But they do have the ability to go after black people full time, and as long as they do, they'll be allowed to keep their toy badge and whatever delusions they're operating under. But even so, occasionally, some bootlick or other has to get that wake-up call. White supremacy loves a prank that takes a long time to pay off so they can see the look on the mark's face when it's time to finally go in. After the murder of Freddie Gray, Marilyn Mosby made a spectacle of herself. She told people that she was seeking justice, etc. She wasn't even trying. She didn't want a conviction because, like all these bootlicks in public office, the main thing she wants is to make it to higher office. So don't kid yourself and think that she was actually trying to convict Freddie Gray's killers. She wasn't. All that political theater she was putting on was for the benefit of the angry black citizens of Baltimore. It was for show, and she got her 15 minutes of fame, though the public wasn't really going for it. Marilyn was letting some of the white media and some of these black feminists gas her head up and tell her that she was something sweet. Oh, but reality always has the last word. Marilyn's been spending the last couple of years with her name back in the headlines, but not for anything good. See, apparently she thought that she could do some of the things she saw these white politicians doing. Taking government money, spending it on whatever, and nothing was going to happen to her. After all, she had a badge. So she began to make some questionable moves to get some fast cash from the government. In 2020, she withdrew $90,000 from Baltimore City's deferred compensation plan. Basically, it was her city retirement account she was pulling money from. Of course, it's not illegal to withdraw money from one's retirement account early, but in Mosby's case, she would have had to pay a 10% federal tax penalty. The only way to avoid that was if she claimed that the withdrawal was necessary because of hardship due to the coronavirus. On her paperwork, the reason that she gave for pulling the money from her account early was that her business was in terrible shape due to the pandemic. The feds said that that was perjury. Her salary as a DA actually had gone up $10,000 that year. I can't imagine anything she's done worthy of that much of a raise, but in a city corrupt as Baltimore, I'm disgusted though not surprised. Okay, so obviously it wasn't because she was making less money, she was making more. But what did she do with that money she withdrew? She bought a house in Florida, near Orlando, for $545,000, and she bought a condo in Florida's Longboat Key for $476,000. So she really wanted to have some property in Florida is what that means. She wanted that Florida property bad. Racist Ron DeSantis' Florida, mind you. That's where she wanted to go to. And she went into debt to the tune of nearly $1 million to get it. Prosecutors say that she also committed crimes when she lied on her paperwork about her federal tax debt. The IRS had put a lien on her Baltimore property due to $45,000 in back taxes she owed. Prosecutors also say she lied on her paperwork when she claimed the property would be a second home. They say she did that because by claiming that this property was going to be a second home, she could get a lower interest rate than if she admitted that it was going to be an investment property. In reality, she had already made an agreement with a management company who would operate this property as a short-term rental. So before she even bought it, she already had someone waiting to rent it out for her. She couldn't even wait until the paperwork was done to buy the property first. She had to sign paperwork to have it rented out beforehand. Isn't this woman supposed to be a lawyer? Shouldn't she already know all this? Well, I guess when you get your law degree from a strip club, they don't cover the part about document perjury. So the case the feds had on her is that she lied about the reason she wanted to withdraw her retirement funds, so she could avoid paying that 10% federal tax penalty, then lied about the Florida property being a second home so she could avoid the taxes she would have had to pay if she admitted it was an investment property, and she lied about the taxes she was behind on because that would have made her a riskier client for a mortgage company and hence brought about a larger interest rate. Basically, they claim she told a bunch of lies to save money on every step of her plan to acquire and sell some real estate in Florida. And by the way, that $500,000 property she bought, it was an 8-bedroom, 4,000 square foot property that was close to Disney World. Now, in July of 2021, Marilyn and her husband finally paid their back taxes, and a few months after that, in November 2021, she sold that Florida property for a $150,000 profit to, get this, a buyer from Baltimore. I guess nobody in Florida wanted it, huh? According to the Baltimore Sun, the buyer was a woman named Grace Nyako. Nyako didn't list a physical address, but instead used a post office box in Baltimore. When the Baltimore Sun reached out to Nyako, she claimed she didn't know Marilyn Mosby and declined to discuss the matter. Well, I can't blame her. All the prosecution's going on. Why say anything that could get you in trouble? So that's the reason that Marilyn Mosby was dragged into court. Now keep in mind, this woman was getting paid $250,000 a year to be an incompetent prosecutor. That's a lot of money for a DA who can't keep the thugs with or without badges in check. Oh, but she's too cute with her bunny ruckus bottle blonde hair dye, don't you know? No cure for stupid. And you'll notice that while the protests were going on, she was talking about how she had law enforcement in her family. Woman was trying to have it both ways. Now, her audience for that pathetic statement were the white political powers that she wanted to stay in the good graces of. And this is how they repaid her. She lost her re-election bid last year, in the primary no less. She didn't even make it to the general election. She's now been replaced by a Democrat, some guy named Ivan Bates. He was a defense attorney and now he's a prosecutor, so nice to see that revolving door is still swinging. The part that makes me laugh, though, is that Mosby's attorney said she couldn't get a fair trial in Baltimore due to negative media coverage. Ain't that something? This black female DA who, to hear her tell it, the whole town loves her stinking drawers and trusted her implicitly, and yet she says she couldn't get a fair trial in Baltimore. But it's not over for Mosby yet. She still faces another federal trial, this one for 2 counts of making false mortgage applications for the vacation homes. The date for that trial hasn't been set yet. Now, before I go any further, I know this might sound contradictory, especially given all the praise I've just heaped on Mosby. I actually agree when she and her boosters say that black politicians are disproportionately targeted by prosecutors compared to white ones. And for the IRS to go after someone for early withdrawals of retirement funds and to actually check and see if they lied on their paperwork, that's a little bit too convenient for my taste, especially due to the mountain of PPE loan applications and other coronavirus measures. So much of a paperwork backlog that the government has, it's unbelievable that the federal government knew to go after Mosby. Unless someone told them to. Sure, she owed money on her taxes, but nothing she did constitutes a big money crime. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if she heard that the IRS has years of paperwork to go through, and some of her pals probably said, don't worry, other people, read white persons, have already done this and none of them got caught, so don't worry about it. Not saying that that's what happened, but the truth of the matter is, if people hear these rumors and they see other folks doing something like that, it's certainly within the realm of imagination. Now, while we can all agree that Marilyn Mosby is hardly on the side of the angels, it's also true that the government isn't either. They didn't just happen to stumble onto what she was doing. This smells like someone tipped them off. Baltimore isn't that far from D.C. after all. But Mosby is learning a hard lesson about how white power actually works. That badge that she had didn't insulate her. She had nuisance suits against her that wouldn't have been dignified except that they were filed by people with genetic immunity from law, which she doesn't have. So, one Negro who thought their badge meant white power liked them is getting her wake-up call. And that brings us to Officer Eric Adams of the NYPD, who also moonlights as the city's mayor. Just the day after Mosby was convicted in her federal trial, the feds announced that they've seized Officer Adams' phone and his iPad. Reports are that they came up and took them right off of him personally. This is part of a corruption probe that they're conducting, and why is that? Well, back in 2021, Eric Adams was Brooklyn's borough president. The New York Times reports allegations that the Turkish government wanted to use a particular building as their consulate. The problem was that the building wasn't open yet because the New York Fire Department had refused to sign off on whether it was safe to occupy. Now, this building is not in Brooklyn, it's in Manhattan. Apparently, Adams had been asked by the Turkish consul general whether he could get the Turks a temporary certificate of occupancy. Adams sent a text to the city's fire chief asking him if he could look into it, though there's currently no evidence that Adams asked the chief to actually do anything in particular, nor did the text show any criminal activity. Now, when Adams ran for mayor, 3 members of a Turkish organization called the Turkin Foundation gave $6,000 to his campaign. The Turkin Foundation was created by Bilal Erdogan, who's the son of Turkey's president, Recep Erdogan. Back in July, 6 people were charged in an alleged scheme to divert tens of thousands of dollars to Adams' campaign through straw donors. Straw donors are a way for big money campaign contributors to circumvent campaign finance limits by recruiting individuals who they can give their money to, and then these straw donors give that money to the intended politician under their own name, and that way the big money donors can exceed campaign donation limits. 2 of the 6 people who were charged have already pleaded guilty. And while Adams wasn't implicated, it just adds more unflattering headlines to the city's top cop, His Honor the Boss. Adams has also taken money from the Turks before. In 2018, he received over $12,000 that time from Turkish interests. He's also made frequent trips to Turkey. He claims that he did it to attract international business to New York. Well, looks like he did, only the business didn't go to the city. It seems to have all come straight to him. Now, Eric Adams was doing that whole what about black-on-black crime thing, you'll recall, when he was running for mayor. And after he became mayor, he chose a stop-and-frisk proponent to be his police commissioner. This mumble-mouthed creep, he just knew that these rich racists in New York loved him. And he was going to go to Congress next, or at the very least, he would be next in line to become New York's governor. Or so he thought. Now, isn't it interesting how the white media gives these big stories talking about how there's so many black politicians in prominent positions? Every election cycle, we get subjected to a barrage of those kind of puff pieces. I mean, they big up these clowns crazy, talking nice about them, and then inevitably the white media winds up running a ton of stories about them being investigated and allegations of wrongdoing, and they dig up every bit of dirt, stuff that you never heard of. Now, remember when Eric Adams was running for mayor of New York? How many stories did the white media run about his Turkish connections, the campaign money? No, they were doing number puff pieces, talking about him like he was the second coming. See, they already knew all this information. That's the reason why they had it all on hand. The same thing they do to these bootlicks whenever it's time to take them down. And when they do, they make sure to say, we got to go after them on everything. Take their money, take their freedom. You got Newsweek already running articles saying that Eric Adams is going to be on his way to prison, potentially. The white media specializes in building Negroes up just so they can tear them down. That's the pattern, and it's been that way for decades, but these bootlicks never learn. They act like obedient little puppies when the white media pats them on the head. You can see their tails wagging and their forked tongues panting. It's pathetic. And when white power dismantles them, it's equal parts pitiful and hilarious. Now, I know that some of you have mentioned that Adams is probably being targeted by Biden's administration because A, they need to take criticism and any sort of attention off of Hunter Biden, and also because with all the criticism of the charges against Trump, that these things might be trumped up a little bit. Well, they need to show that they're even-handed. But they're not going to be going after Hunter Biden to prove that, or any white politician of any note. Instead, they're targeting black ones. That's the game. And also, when it comes to Adams' opposition to New York taking in any more migrants, there may be more than a little truth to the idea that this is a shot across his personal bow. Biden and the boys telling him he better stop giving Massa any backtalk. As far as proving quid pro quo on Adams for those donations, that's not going to be a straightforward task for the feds, but it doesn't have to be. Already the white media is saying this situation could land Officer Adams in prison. Now, isn't it a little bit early to be using that kind of talk? This is just a probe after all. Not even an official criminal investigation. No charges. Not even anyone pointing the finger at him. But just the very fact that there's a probe that has his name attached to it, you got the white media already saying there's a chance he's going to be going to prison. They want to put that idea out there. They want prosecutors to be thinking, how do we get this guy in a prison cell? How do we put his empty head on our trophy wall? The message is being sent. A wake-up call for these bootlicks, but of course one they won't pick up because they never do. As these bootlicks see it, they don't need black people. They've escaped blackness. Why, they're doing just fine on their own. They're going to be swimming through this white supremacist society like a fish through a pond. This is why Adams does nothing for black people, and in fact he ran on a campaign of saying the real problem's black-on-black violence. This while black people are calling out violence from the police. Adams' lifelong employer. As long as these bootlicks can keep getting non-black campaign funds, as they see it, they're on the inside. They're playing the game. Of course, it's a game that none of them ever wins. White supremacy has no permanent plans for any of these clowns. Though Officer Adams thought that by showing the same disrespect and contempt for black people as Bloomberg had, he would be supported by the very same white racist who had supported Bloomberg. And for a hot minute, he actually thought it worked. He thought that they liked him. He thought that his spitting in black people's faces meant those racist white donors loved him now. But they don't. He could be a cop, he could be the mayor, he could find a cure for cancer. In their eyes, he's still just another nigger. And Marilyn Mosby, she also thought she was on the inside track. Poor Marilyn. She had been planning to get into investment properties in Florida. I guess that was her exit strategy from public service. Leave Baltimore, use her savings to get into real estate, and go retire in Florida. Too bad nobody ever told her that being a bootlick is a career path that doesn't come with a retirement plan, though it does come with a jail cell. And if the white media has its way, Mosby and Adams will wind up bunkmates. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Charlie, Philander Bryant, Frederica Moore, Cedric Etheridge, and Latavius. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.